Welcome to your astrological forecast for the week of Monday, May 13th through Sunday, May 19th, 2024. This week there's a lot happening. There has been a lot happening. I know I sound like a broken record because every week lately is so dramatic. And before we actually get into the astrology for this week, there is definitely some juicy stuff to talk about astrologically. But before we get into that, I just wanted to mention how, at least anecdotally in my life, I do work with the public. I don't have a lot of friends and family necessarily, but there are different people that I run into, and it just seems to me that in my life and in everyone's lives that I've come in contact with, there's so much going on. There's so much life and death, birth and close calls and literally people dying in some cases, animals dying. But I think right now is also a huge time of birth as well. Marriage, there has been so much happening just in the last couple weeks. And, that's not even to mention how much is going on in the world. And I think right now people are stressed, they're scared, they're concerned, not just about what's happening currently, but I think that we can all sense that, we are really close to a tipping point in so many different areas, whether that be individually or as a collective. There's just so much going on, so much intensity. And astrologically, I think this is largely, at least in the relatively short term, this is largely due to this huge cluster that we're still dealing with. We've been dealing with this for a couple months now, but this huge cluster was really centered around Aries. It still largely is, with Mars, North Node Chiron, and Mercury still in Aries this week. But now we also have Venus, Uranus, Sun, and Jupiter in Taurus. So that's 8 major placements just in these two signs of Aries and Taurus. So a huge focus there. So in general, for all of us, there were these huge new beginnings that really ramped up, and we were thrust into these new worlds and had these really exciting new developments back in, April with so much Aries focus. And now we still do have a lot of that, dynamic new beginning type of energy, that fire energy of Aries, but we also have so much Taurus that is all about stabilizing what has developed recently, and, coming through with the follow through and the work ethic to kind of nurture and, bring some structure to these developments that have happened just a few weeks ago. Okay, so that's kind of what we're dealing with. Like I always say, to see how this is affecting you personally, you just have to see where all this energy, all these placements, where are they in your chart? Where does, Aries and Taurus, this general part of the zodiac, where does that fall in your chart? Because that's where you have likely experienced a lot of new activity, new changes, new developments, and then now kind of hopefully the stabilization of those new developments this past week or two. Another thing too that is kind of similar to what I just said but slightly different, we had again so much new stuff in April, right? Between the eclipse season, Mercury retrograde in Aries, also the Jupiter Uranus conjunction. And like I said last week, we're really dealing with a lot of the aftershocks. April was earthquake energy, very literally in many parts of the globe, but also figuratively, right? And so now, both literally and figuratively, we are dealing with aftershocks. I think that's a really good way to put it. And this is partially due to where the astrology is. Mercury is only just now, kind of recently, leaving the area where it was previously retrograde last month. And this week, we're going to experience Sun crossing over first Uranus and then Jupiter in these kind of last degrees of Taurus. So that's where, again, this is bringing up that earthquake energy that came with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in late April. Now, that's being brought up, that's reverberating and echoing as the Sun crosses over these two planets this week. So that's where, again, there are so many new developments and ramifications that are kind of happening that really got started last month, but we're still, experiencing the reverberations of those things, because these things don't just happen in a day. With astrology, there's so many things that we can look to a particular day for where an aspect technically happened, but when it comes to these really big scale long-term aspects, they don't just happen in a day. Technically, they do reach their kind of peak in a day, but it can take weeks, even months, for this to kind of for us to see where it pans out, so to speak. So this is true in particular of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which did happen last month, but it is very relevant this week. Okay, so let's get into some details. Let's see what's going on specifically with the astrology for this week. So quick shout out to the moon. Moon will be transiting from Cancer all the way to Libra this week. And we will have a first quarter moon on Wednesday. But before we talk about that, I did want to talk about Monday really quickly. This is the chart for noon Eastern Standard Time, Monday, May 13th. And this is the day where Sun conjoins Uranus at 23 degrees Taurus. So again, we can kind of view this in the lens of what it is, Sun conjunct Uranus. But I do think, again, it's also important to remember we just had that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction only a few weeks ago. So Sun now conjoining Uranus, kind of shining that spotlight as the Sun does, bringing that focus and attention, in this case, to Uranus. That's going to, again, it's bringing up those kind of echoes and reverberations from that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. I hope that makes sense. So basically what we can expect is, we can expect the unexpected. That's kind of a motto that goes with Uranus. Specifically in the realm of Taurus type things. So for one, in nature, natural events. Here where I'm in Florida, it's been very hot and dry, and everyone's been telling me that's the sign of an impending intense hurricane season. So that's just an example, but wherever you are in the globe, there's this potential for kind of unpredictable earth events, earthquakes, other natural events, etc. So that's kind of one potential manifestation of Sun conjunct Uranus in Taurus. But Taurus doesn't just have to do with nature and weather and things like that. Taurus also has to do with how we support ourselves. Much of that is financial. So there has been a lot of murmuring about changes to cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. I don't personally follow a lot of that. Honestly, right now, I don't personally follow much of anything. I'm kind of just hearing these little murmurings from different people and different little clips that I overhear in my life. But I am aware vaguely of these. We are experiencing very dramatic changes to our economies, to our finances, to the very nature of currency itself, as Uranus is Uranus has been transiting Taurus since 2018, and it will continue to do so till 2026. So really, we're in this 8-year period of dramatic, revolutions to our finances and our economies, etc. But specifically this week on Monday, we can see some friction. We can see some potential sudden changes, unpredictable changes with this Sun conjunct Uranus aspect. All right. And again, as always, look to where this falls in your chart for a potential area of breakthroughs, unpredictability. But I always say with Uranus, the unpredictability often comes from within. It comes on a mental level. This is an intellectual energy. Uranus is connected more to the air element. For such a radical, unpredictable energy, you might think that it would be fire and it would, really dramatically change things in a very direct way. But Uranus actually isn't really related to the fire element at all. It's air. So that shows you that it has to do with changes to our perception. Uranus was the first, major planet that we discovered, that we didn't know about before. I think it was 1781, somewhere in that vicinity. But what's interesting about Uranus is you actually can sometimes see it with the naked eye. It's just that it's so slow moving and so dim that we didn't know it was there, at least in Western society. So that's just the only reason why I went into all that, is because that just shows you the nature of Uranus. It's something that it was always there. It's just that our perception changed about it. Does that make sense? So wherever 23 degrees Taurus, the Sun Uranus conjunction is, that can be an area where our perception is changing, our understanding of nature or of our lives may be dramatically changing with this aspect. Going to Wednesday, May 15th, this is the day of the first quarter moon in Leo. So it looks like technically it happens kind of mid-morning Eastern Standard Time. And this will occur with the Sun at 25 degrees Taurus being squared by the Moon at 25 degrees Leo. This is a first quarter square, first quarter moon, right? So the Moon it's just reached 1/4 of the way through the lunar cycle. Okay, this is a relatively new moon, but by this point it is about half full, if you see it in the sky. So I know that's confusing. The moon, when it looks half full, is a quarter moon, but that's because it's a quarter of the way through the cycle. This is extremely volatile. I always say this is really something that I don't know why everyone only pays attention to the full moons. It's great that people do pay attention to the full moons as much as they do, but I really do think the quarter moons are overlooked. In particular, the first quarter moon is, I would argue, the most volatile part of the lunar cycle, because this marks the point in the cycle where something began about a week ago. Many things began, but the beginning was in our minds. It was in the ether. It was in our subconscious. By the time you reach this point 1 week later where the first quarter moon happens, whatever began in our minds, it is now fully taking shape. It's manifesting in a very physical way. And that's where we get this need for physical change, physical activity. This can be restless. It can be stressful, but it doesn't have to be stressful. It's just change, right? Change is hard for us to deal with. I understand how it could be objectively stressful, but at the same time, this is an opportunity to make change or to start something new. Again, in a physical way, we have to make that differentiate. What's the word? We have to differentiate between. It's a new beginning, but what does that mean? A new moon was a beginning in a more like psychological or cerebral, soulful type of way, spiritual type of way. This is a new beginning in a very literal, like physical type of way. If you've been kind of waiting and thinking, oh, what's a good time to start this thing that I've been thinking of? Now is the time to go ahead. Especially in this case, first quarter moon is in the very fiery sign of Leo. Very excellent time for making a change or starting something new. Let's see, what else do I have to say about that? I think that's pretty much it, honestly. This is a very boisterous, very active phase for sure. So we can definitely expect Wednesday to be kind of crazy. Children and pets can be, bouncing off the walls very late at night, or people in general, maybe late. They may be awake maybe later than usual because there's just so much energy. There's so much intensity that comes with this type of aspect. Jumping ahead to Saturday, May 18th. Now we have Sun conjoining Jupiter. And this brings me to my point where I'm really viewing this as kind of one thing. When it comes to the Sun first conjoining Uranus on Monday, May 13th, and then conjoining Jupiter on Saturday, May 18th, I'm really viewing this as like a two-part process, but it's like one thing. Does that make sense? And the reason why is because, partially because, again, we just had that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction so recently. But also, Jupiter and Uranus are still pretty close to each other. Uranus is at 23 degrees Taurus all week. Jupiter is at 28 degrees Taurus much of the week. So as the Sun first conjoins Uranus and then conjoins Jupiter, the Sun is pretty much within orb of a conjunction to both of these planets all week, if that makes sense. So it's like, it's really two parts of the same thing. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. Also, Jupiter and Uranus, they do have some things in common. Both are very unpredictable. Both can be all about like learning new things and, finding new paradigms, new worldviews, psychological or spiritual breakthroughs and realizations. Really, if you think about it, Jupiter and Uranus have a lot in common. Both are also very volatile and unpredictable. Jupiter does have more of a positive connotation, though. I view Uranus as more neutral, but Jupiter is more pleasant. It's more, bringing abundance. It can be, too much of a good thing with Jupiter. That can have its downsides, but generally speaking, Jupiter is a positive energy. And it is very interesting as well. Both Jupiter and the Sun are very close to leaving Taurus at this point. Uranus is a different story. Uranus is very slow. Still got a couple more years in Taurus, but Sun, you can see the start of this cluster of benefics. Jupiter, Sun, and Venus are all very close to each other at this point. Venus has just passed Uranus on Saturday. So the reason why I'm kind of throwing all this jargon at you is because this is actually a really big deal. Jupiter, Sun, and Venus, these are the three major benefics of the solar system. So in other words, astrologically, Jupiter, Sun, and Venus, of course, they each have their own identities. But the one commonality is that they are the easiest energies to work with. They generally bring abundance, fun, pleasure. They help us to kind of expand in a really pleasant way, generally speaking. So all of these are kind of starting to cluster at the end of Taurus, and they will all enter Gemini, I believe like next week, or, they'll all enter Gemini around the same time. But anyway, right now it's showing a lot of abundance, pleasure, focused on Taurus. We're wanting stability, and who can blame us after after last month? Really, so much dynamic changes and intensity, and it was very exciting, but it was also stressful. We're wanting stability. We're valuing the constants in our life. Of course, that is kind of a blanket statement applying to everyone. We're not all exactly on the same page, but I would say generally speaking, that's where we're at as a collective. Okay. Also, quick side note as well, Mercury has entered Taurus this week too. So that's showing, even when it comes to like intellectually, mentally, we are focusing in a more consistent type of way as well. And that's just the nature of things. When you have such an abundance in Aries like we did last month, it's inevitable that you're going to get an abundance of Taurus the following month. You know what I mean? Aries, it's like Aries implies Taurus and so on and so forth. So yeah, we are very much immersed in these like earthy, stable vibes of Taurus, but that will change next week. And that leads me to the final day of this forecast, Sunday, May 19th. I just wanted to show you this because this is actually the last day, not only of this week, of this forecast, it's also the last day of Taurus season. So Sun at this point is at the very last degree of Taurus. Jupiter very close behind, very exciting stuff going on, and then Venus is at 24 degrees Taurus as well. Venus is quickly catching up to Jupiter and the Sun. And again, all three of these major benefics are going to enter Gemini at the same time, which I'm very excited for on a subjective level. But trying to view this like from an objective point of view as well, I do think this will be very pleasant and very exciting for many of us because Aries and Taurus are so much more intense, and I think when you have an abundance, kind of like what I was saying earlier, when you have an abundance in one area, it kind of implies or seeks the energy that comes after. Does that make sense? So Aries is lacking that stable, earthy Taurus energy. Taurus is lacking that spontaneous, open Gemini energy. Do you know what I mean? And Aries and Taurus in general together are, they're very great for starting things and being ambitious, being productive. We may have accomplished so much in the last month or two. We may have really started new things and stabilized those new things. That's extremely powerful, but it's also very intense. Very, we may have felt like we couldn't really breathe with so much of that energy. We really don't have a lot of air in the charts lately. So that will dramatically change next week. So that's where I was kind of saying I do think this transition to Gemini season is going to be kind of a breath of fresh air, kind of literally. Gemini is very detached energy. Gemini is going to bring in a little more humor, a little more silly energy. I think we could really use that after this really intense, last couple of months, if I'm being honest. So that's what I have for you for this forecast. I really hope you have a great week. Next week, again, we're going to have Sun entering Gemini, Jupiter entering Gemini, and a full moon in Sagittarius. So very exciting stuff. We're really switching into these really fun Gemini and Sagittarius vibes next week. So I think that's very exciting. I hope you do too. Again, I hope you have the best week, and I look forward to talking to you next week. See you later.